Good evening. Welcome to Kenya News Update. I'm your host. Tonight, we're taking a deep dive into a story that has been shrouded in digital darkness. New, exclusive photographs have emerged, giving the world a chilling glimpse inside Iran's bloody crackdown on anti-government protests. For weeks, the Iranian regime imposed a near-total nationwide internet blackout, effectively obscuring what human rights groups are calling a mass killing. But one photographer in Tehran managed to document the aftermath, sharing images and testimonies that paint a harrowing picture of state violence. Over the next 12 minutes, we'll examine these photos, hear from survivors, analyze the regime's tactics, and explore the international response, including the delicate position of the United States under President Donald Trump. We'll also look at what this means for global stability and Kenya's own foreign policy considerations. Let's begin with the timeline. The current wave of protests in Iran erupted in mid-January 2026. The immediate trigger was the government's announcement of a new, sweeping set of mandatory religious observance laws, which many saw as the final straw after years of economic hardship and social restrictions. Within 48 hours, protests had spread from the capital, Tehran, to at least 15 major cities. The government's response was swift and brutal. By January 20th, 2026, authorities had initiated a complete internet shutdown, cutting off most of the country's 85 million people from the global web. This blackout lasted for 120 consecutive hours, or 5 full days. It was during this period, from January 21st to January 25th, 2026, that the most severe crackdowns are reported to have occurred. Now to the photographs. The source is a photographer in Tehran whose identity we are protecting. They risked their life to capture and later smuggle out these images. The first set shows a residential street in the Narmak district of Tehran. The timestamp is 10 p.m. on January 22nd, 2026. The image is grainy, taken from a window. It shows a dark street illuminated by the headlights of 3 Basij militia pickup trucks. In the middle of the road is a long, dark trail. The photographer's caption is simple: a trail of blood left behind by a protester who was shot. The trail is approximately 15 meters long, suggesting the individual was moving or being dragged after being wounded. Another photo from the same night shows a makeshift medical clinic in a residential basement. We see 4 young men receiving treatment for what appear to be gunshot wounds. Bandages are soaked with blood. A volunteer medic, their face blurred, holds up 2 empty boxes of medical supplies. The caption reads, "We ran out of antiseptic and gauze by midnight." The human cost behind these images is staggering. While the official government death toll stands at just 42, international human rights monitors and opposition groups tell a very different story. The Center for Human Rights in Iran, based in New York, has compiled data from hospital sources, funeral notices, and verified social media reports. Their conservative estimate puts the number of protesters killed between January 15th and January 30th, 2026 at 347. They believe the true number could be over 500. Furthermore, they document at least 5,200 arrests in the same period. Let's put that into perspective. That's an arrest rate of roughly 260 people per day during the peak of the unrest. The majority of those detained are under the age of 30. We now have testimony from some of those who survived. We're using pseudonyms for their safety. Milad, 23 from Tehran, describes the moment he was captured. He says, "A Basiji officer looked at me, saw my jeans and my haircut and said, 'Go tell your prince to pull these people back.'" He was referring to Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the former Shah. Milad continues, "Then they beat me with batons. I saw them shoot a boy who couldn't have been more than 17 in the leg. He was just holding a phone." Another survivor, Parisa, a 19-year-old university student from Isfahan, shared her story via an audio message. "They used tear gas inside the metro station. People were trampling each other to get air. I saw an older woman collapse. We carried her out, but the ambulances wouldn't come. They said it was too dangerous." So, who is carrying out this crackdown? The primary forces are the Basij Resistance Force, a paramilitary volunteer militia, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. The Basij are often the first line of response, known for their ideological fervor. The IRGC, a formal military branch, provides heavier support. According to analysis of the new photos and previous patterns, the regime deploys a layered strategy. First, mass arrests using the Basij. Second, targeted lethal force, often from rooftops, using snipers believed to be from IRGC special units. Third, the systematic internet blackout to prevent evidence from emerging and to stop protesters from organizing. This digital siege is a critical component. Access to the global internet in Iran fell to just 5% of normal levels during the blackout. Even internal Iranian networks were severely throttled, operating at about 15% capacity. This isn't just censorship, it's a weapon of war used against a civilian population. Now, let's examine the international reaction, which has been notably fractured. The United Nations Secretary General issued a statement expressing deep concern and calling for restraint. The European Union condemned the violence and is reportedly considering a new package of sanctions targeting specific IRGC commanders and technology firms that enable the internet shutdowns. However, the most critical voice, that of the United States, has been measured. Remember, Donald Trump is currently in his second term as president. His administration's policy toward Iran has historically been one of maximum pressure, but the dynamics have shifted. A White House spokesperson said the U.S. is closely monitoring the situation and that the world is watching the Iranian regime's treatment of its own people. Notably absent were calls for regime change or immediate, severe new sanctions. This has led to debate among analysts. Some argue the Trump administration is preoccupied with other global hotspots and sees instability in Iran as a greater threat than the current regime. Others suggest there may be back-channel communications, perhaps related to regional security or nuclear negotiations, that are tempering the public response. Contrast this with the reaction from regional powers. Saudi Arabia and Israel have been vocal in their condemnation, but their statements are widely viewed in Tehran as opportunistic. Russia and China, key allies of Iran, have blocked stronger action at the UN Security Council. Both countries have reiterated their standard position of non-interference in internal affairs. For Kenya and the African Union, this presents a complex diplomatic challenge. Kenya has traditionally maintained correct, if not warm, relations with Iran, focusing on trade and technical cooperation. President William Ruto's government has not issued a formal statement on the crackdown. Diplomats we spoke to suggest Nairobi is walking a fine line, balancing its principles of supporting human rights with its pragmatic foreign policy interests and not wanting to be seen as aligning solely with a Western narrative. Let's look at the economic dimension, which is a root cause of the discontent. Iran's economy has been in a dire state for years, battered by international sanctions and domestic mismanagement. The official inflation rate is hovering around 52%. The value of the Iranian rial has plummeted, losing over 70% of its value against the US dollar in the past 3 years. Unemployment among youth is estimated at over 25%. When the government announced the new religious laws, it was, for many, a symbol of a regime prioritizing ideology over the basic welfare of its people. The cost of the crackdown itself is also immense. Maintaining the internet blackout for 120 hours required sophisticated technology and coordination, likely costing the state millions of dollars. Mobilizing tens of thousands of Basij and IRGC personnel has a significant financial toll. Yet, the regime seems willing to pay any price to maintain control. What does the future hold? The regime has shown it will use overwhelming force to survive. The protests, for now, appear to have been suppressed through sheer brutality and isolation. However, the underlying grievances, economic despair, social repression, and a deep desire for freedom, especially among the 60% of the population under the age of 30, have not been addressed. They have only been buried along with the dead. The emergence of these photos, despite the blackout, proves the regime cannot completely control the narrative. The risk of another, potentially larger, eruption remains high. The international community's divided response may have given the regime a short-term sense of impunity, but it also deepens the resentment of the Iranian people. For Kenya and the world, the events in Iran are a stark reminder of the fragility of social contracts and the extreme measures some governments will take to hold onto power. They also highlight the new battlefield of information warfare, where controlling the internet is as important as controlling the streets. As we conclude this deep dive, we are left with the haunting images from Tehran, a 15-meter trail of blood, a basement clinic running out of supplies, and the defiant testimonies of young Iranians like Milad and Parisa. Their struggle, though silenced for now, is a story that refuses to be erased. This has been a Kenya News Update special report. Subscribe to Kenya News Update today for more in-depth coverage of the stories that shape our world.